There's a lot of young people who want to pursue scientific careers, but they're being told by both their pastor and maybe by their university science professor, both are saying, no, faith and science don't go together. You've got to pick one or the other. And at BioLogos, for saying absolutely not.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture.
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
For inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I catch up. We also talk about our former president having a new product on the market. And then later on the pod, we sit down with the president of BioLogos, Dr. Deborah Haarsma. It's going to be a good pod, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm sore.
Oh, okay. You're going to have to explain that one.
So we are in the process of getting ready to move.
We are.
We are downsizing.
Yes.
Which is very bittersweet.
Very.
But as our listeners know, as our friends know, we just clearly do not spend enough time in our home right now to justify the space that we have, the upkeep with the backyard, all the things. Anyway, so we're going through this process that many, many people have gone through before us, which involves lots of attic clean out.
It does.
Right?
Lots of boxes, lots of stuff.
Lots of memorabilia.
Around. Yes.
Lots of trash. Lots of why did we move this here in the first place?
18 years of
right?
this,
Okay.
this stuff.
But treasures are there to be found as
Treasures
well.
galore, indeed.
One of which we are not on video podcast, which is probably a good thing because one of which is the diagram that you drew when explaining the birds and the bees to our oldest son.
It was not my best work or my best day.
No, but he's got a whole comedy routine
he does
about
have a whole
it.
set about it.
For the right amount of donation, we will send you the link to that comedy set that he did in London.
Yes.
But okay, so I found something kind of fun the other day in a box.
All right,
I
tell
will
me.
share with our listeners. So someone, when we got married, gifted me a book.
Did they?
Called The Stained Glass House, a handbook for ministers' wives.
Oh my gosh. Did it teach you how to be submissive?
Yes. No shade. I have not reread. I don't know that I ever read it cover to cover, but I just flipped through it for a few minutes as we were going through things and found
some golden nuggets in there.
Some golden nuggets. There may be more golden nuggets to come from this handbook for ministers' wives. I'm sure when we got married, lots of people gave you handbooks.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? For being a good husband.
Show me how to be a good husband, how to be a good leader.
To a pastor's wife, right?
Yes.
How to serve and I'm sure you got lots of books.
Lots of materials.
Okay, I got all sorts of advice and books and things, just so you know.
Yeah, I didn't get one thing.
You guys.
Because it's ingrained. God just, bestows that wisdom upon us.
All right, hold on. I have to vomit. Okay, we're back. So the little nugget I have for you today talks about anger and how it certainly shouldn't be stockpiled until Sunday morning when you both go to church mad. Okay. And then the author talks about she's compiled a list from other experienced ministers' wives about anger and about dealing with your husband. I'm just going to highlight a few things. Mm-hmm. One of the tips is speak up. Don't make him have to read you.
Nothing wrong with that.
How do I do in that regard?
You speak up quite well.
But also, you should read me.
I should know what, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, my second language, which I am very fluent in, is passive-aggressive.
You're very fluent in that.
I'm very fluent. So you would think that you would have learned it by now. However, doesn't always work. Another tip is don't nag. Come out with it once and for all. And here's one of my favorites. Uh-huh. If you're mad at God, instead of at your husband, tell him so. Both hymns. Hymns, you guys, is capital HIMS.
Well, we are an extension of the divine, you know.
Right? So if I can't even. So if you're mad at God instead of at your husband, tell him so, both hymns. I will be sure to do that henceforth.
Okay, so all of this wisdom is for ministers' wives.
Yes.
Prior to Sunday morning, right?
Well, I mean, it's just in general, I guess, yes, but especially before Sunday. Before Sunday.
Yeah. What does it say about recording podcast?
Sadly,
is that transferable?
it is not in here. I'll write that book. How's that?
By the way, you're looking at me.
Somebody fund that. I will write that book. Okay. So here's another one. You'll have to let me know how I did with this.
Okay.
After how many years have you been married?
20, almost 30.
Something like that. Okay. Never argue in public. That means church too. We are not allowed to argue in public. Yet I feel like we do that publicly every week a little bit.
Don't say anything about podcasts.
Podcasts. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think. Yes, we did argue at church. You know. Oh well, whatever.
Usually you did the arguing. I just did the listening.
True, but again, if you would get fluent and passive aggressive, none of these things would be an issue.
Well, after 28 years, I have done a good job of interpreting the voices in your head.
True. They're learning to like you. Okay, so another one. Remember that sometimes you may be the scapegoat, but you don't want him to lash out at church members, do you?
Well, of course not. That would be a sin.
Can you believe that? I read that and I had to read it again. I'm like, is she saying what I think she's saying? Yes. She's saying that you should allow yourself to be the punching bag when your husband is mad at church members. And directly following that, be sure the climate is good for him to blow his top. You shouldn't have all the fun. I'm not even kidding.
Wow, this is gold.
I mean, it goes on from there. The other one was kind of funny. Don't throw things, especially if you live in a parsonage, which I thought was kind of funny.
Because it's the parsonage. If you own the home, yeah, go ahead and throw stuff.
Exactly. But and then the following paragraph reads, a husband's physical needs are more easily distinguished from his other needs. If he, like Potiphar, quote, concerns himself with nothing but the food he eats, then you know how to heat up the meatloaf. But when he sits in the lazy boy with that faraway ogle in his eye, you may be hard put to decipher the message. You may think he's dreaming of you and the new silk sheets when what he's actually thinking about is the prayer breakfast Friday morning.
Yeah, that's what he's thinking about with that special ogle in his eye.
I mean, if I had ever put silk sheets on the bed, Mitch Randall, would you have been thinking about the prayer breakfast on Friday morning? Let's just go ahead and lay it all out there.
Oh my gosh, that is fantastic.
Anywho,
wow.
So sometimes moving can be fun. Look forward to more little nuggets of gems that we find along the way.
Well, I can't wait. That was brilliant.
Thank you. You are welcome. So
yes, it is Holy Week
Good
this
Friday.
Week. Yes, and it is Good Friday when the pod drops. And so, as any good Christian would do, you would humble yourself and lift up Jesus during this time of reflection, leading to Good Friday, and then, of course, the great celebration on Sunday morning. But our former president, DJT, decided
this was the perfect week.
The perfect week. Decided that Jesus his story wasn't good enough. So DJT decided to insert himself into the narrative.
I'm pretty sure there's a joke here we talked about last week about Jesus riding an ass into Jerusalem. I'm pretty sure there's a joke to be made but I'll come up with it 10 minutes after we record and it will have been golden. But for now, just know there's a joke there.
There is a joke there.
I'll figure it out later.
So, Donald J. Trump has partnered with singer-songwriter Lee Greenwood to offer their followers the righteous, the beautiful, the most magnificent Bible that you've ever seen. the God Bless the USA Bible, Missy?
So I have decided, this brought back a memory several weeks ago, I don't know, a couple months ago, when we had our staff retreat in Dallas, and one of our staff members that I will not call out, maybe, I don't know, talked about when they were in youth group and cosplaying persecution. And I thought, this is what he's doing. He's totally cosplaying persecution. Mm-hmm. And I regret to tell you, and also our supporters, that we have probably 200 of our Good Faith Media stickers, the like ones you put on your computer or whatever, that we are going to have to now throw away. Do you know why?
Why?
Because I sat through and watched the entire
why
promo
would you do that to
video
yourself?
that DJT, as you've called him, released. And in it, he says we have to stand up, speak out, and pray that God will bless America.
What I got from that is DJT is listening to Good Faith Media.
Oh, I'm sure he does. So for those who don't know, we have some of our branded stickers that are great that say that you created that say stand up, speak out, and step forward, right? To promote justice, inclusion, and freedom, and all of these things we believe in. Mm-hmm. So when he said that, stand up and speak out, I thought, oh no, he's taking it from you. But then he goes on to say that foundation is under attack more than ever before. Make America pray again. So I just thought, there it is. He's cosplaying persecution.
He is. He absolutely is. Well, I went to the website to check out, the purchase of this God Bless the USA Bible.
Did you? Is this one of those things you want your kids to come in and wipe out your web browser history when you die?
No doubt about it. So, well, if you are tempted to buy the God Bless the USA Bible, just know that there's no takesy-backsies.
Takesy-back.
Yeah, all sales are final.
No take-backs,
yeah,
right?
no take-backs, yeah. All sales are final.
Well, they said if it's damaged, you can send it back.
Right, if it's damaged. But this is the only Bible that DJT has endorsed. So, and it happens to be the King James Version, Missy.
Can you explain why that's problematic, Reverend Doctor?
Well, the King James Version's lots of problems with it, just in the translation, for so many reasons.
Wait, I don't want to go into it's not a translation problem, but the problem with the people who camp out and say that is the be-all, end-all, the one translation we should look to. Yeah. Talk about that very briefly, because we're going long.
Well, there's a group of people that think it's King James only, and it is the King's English, which translates into the white supremacy version of the Bible. And so that's the only Bible that's authoritative for them, not anything that's a more literal translation. It's the King James Version. So there's a lot of problems with it, but that's just one of them.
Yeah, we could probably have a longer discussion about
really
that.
could.
Maybe I shouldn't have opened that can of worms just right now.
Yeah. But probably more problematic with this, and again, we can't spend a lot of time on it, is that inside the God Bless the USA Bible is the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the chorus by Lee Greenwood.
which is handwritten, I think, right? Or something like that?
Yes, handwritten.
Isn't there something in the actual Bible about idols and things like that might correlate here?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just, it goes on. It's this long narrative. And again, so much we could say about this, but this long narrative attempting to make the founding of the United States of America divinely inspired, and the documents associated with that as almost equal footing as the Bible itself. Mm-hmm. And that's very, very dangerous territory. And I write about it this week in my column at goodfaithmedia.org. So you want to know more about all of that, you can go to that column. But yeah, it was lunacy at its zenith this week as DJT decided that Jesus wasn't enough. He needed to promote his own Bible that you can buy for $59.99.
So this sort of correlates to our, sort of in a weird way, our interview today with Deborah Haarsma from BioLogos.
Yes.
Talking about faith and science, and in what you just said, just reminded me of, again, the purpose and intention of the Bible.
Right.
Versus the purpose and intention of science exploration. And so we are going to sit down and talk to her about this, about the BioLogos conference, and about science and faith and how the two of those can work together, not against one another. And then we can kind of unpack that a little bit at the end.
Yep. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Deborah Haarsma from BioLogos. Hey, Missy.
What's up?
Speed round. Ready? Things that go together.
Oh, fun. I'll start. Peanut butter and jelly.
Mac and cheese.
Bert and Ernie.
Me and you.
Aw.
Faith and science.
Wait. What? 1993 me would like to object.
As a matter of fact, yes, faith and science do go together. So I'd like to invite our listeners, along with both 1993 and present day you, to join me at the upcoming BioLogos Faith and Science Conference, April 17th through the 19th in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. Come hear world-renowned scientists, researchers, and people of faith such as Francis Collins, Philip Yancey, and many more as they talk about faith and science working hand in hand.
Wait, Mitch. I just thought of another one.
What?
Good Faith Weekly and coupon code.
I love it. I see what you did there. And you're right. BioLogos is offering our listeners a 10% discount with the code GOODFAITH. Visit conference.biologos.org to register using the code GOODFAITH, and we'll see you there. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Deborah Haarsma is president of BioLogos. Deborah is an astrophysicist and a renowned speaker on the fascinating intersection of modern science and Christian faith. Her insightful talks have graced research universities, churches, and prestigious public venues like the National Press Club. Mark your calendars for the highly anticipated BioLogos Faith and Science 2024 conference, scheduled for April 17th and 19th of this year in Raleigh, North Carolina. This event promises to be a hub of intellectual discourse and spiritual exploration. For more details, visit their website, conference.biologos.org, and be sure to use the discount code GOODFAITH to receive 10% off. Deborah, welcome to this episode of Good Faith Weekly.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So, Deb, I believe I can say with all confidence that you are the first astrophysicist we have had on the podcast. So before we dig in...
Okay. What took you so long?
This is a question I'm asking myself. I have no idea. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about what your job entails. And just tell us what an astrophysicist does.
Sure. So I'm a scientist and I study stars and galaxies and the universe as a whole. So I did research in those areas for many years, studying how galaxies change over time, how the universe formed and how it is expanding. And then for the last 11 years, I've been president of BioLogos, where I get to tell people about astronomy and think about the intersection of science and faith.
That's
Excellent.
great.
So tell us a little bit more about BioLogos and the mission of the organization and the work that you do.
Yeah, this work is so important in our culture today. So at BioLogos, we bring together Christ-centered faith with rigorous science. And there's a lot of people in our culture who think faith is on one side of the divide and science is on the other, and they just don't go together at all. And so since I'm a scientist myself, and I'm a Christian, I love Jesus Christ, I love the scriptures, it's just heartbreaking to watch there be this kind of divide. Mm-hmm. And it's not just for me. There's a lot of young people who want to pursue scientific careers, but they're being told by both their pastor and maybe by their university science professor, both are saying, no, faith and science don't go together. You've got to pick one or the other. And at BioLogos, we're saying, absolutely not. They go together in such beautiful ways because as we study the natural world, we are studying the very handiwork of God, and we can praise and worship God for that. And as we bring faith into the practice of science, we can do it wholeheartedly as a way to study what he's made and then use the findings of science to care for people in medicine, to care for the planet, to serve others. So at BioLogos, we bring this together. We believe that faith and science can work hand in hand instead of being opposed.
I love that. Because, Deb, I know you're aware of this, but faith and science have often been pitted against one another throughout history. In some cases, science was almost treated as the antithesis of faith. So can you explain that tension throughout history and why BioLogos thinks that faith and science are not at odds, but are very complementary to one another?
If you think back to the first days of science, like Copernicus and Newton and Kepler especially had wonderfully deep Christian faith, Robert Boyle. Okay, so when I studied physics and astronomy, these are sort of the names you read in the textbook.
Right, yeah.
Luminaries in the early days of science. And they were believers. You read what they write, and especially with Kepler and Boyle, it's such a deep faith and such a humble faith. They're regularly praying about their research and worshiping God for what they found. So it's only in the centuries since that it has become set up that somehow faith is the rational, science is the rational choice, and faith is somehow just about feelings or something. There was this billboard that somebody caught recently, and it's from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, but it has the photo of somebody who says, "I'm an atheist," in big letters, "I put my faith in science."
Right.
And for those of us who are Christians, that doesn't make sense. We put our faith in God. And for me as a scientist, it also doesn't make sense because science isn't something you put your faith in. Scientists don't talk that way. We talk about, well, there's a certain amount of evidence for this particular model, and it has these error bars and this confidence interval. We don't we might say it's a reliable finding to such and such percentage level, we'll measure that, but we don't put our faith in it. And science isn't going to be what saves us. We need to look to our Creator and our Savior for who can save us.
That's a really interesting delineation in the faith element. I think I love that you touched on that in saying scientists don't put their faith in science. I don't know. That just made a lot of sense to me. You're looking at evidence. You're just saying this is what data, this is what evidence is telling me. Therefore, this is what it is. And I don't know. I found that interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I can remember, Deb, attending seminary a long time ago. I had this Old Testament professor who talked about the importance of faith and science and how they complemented one another. And believe it or not, that was at a Southern Baptist seminary where I heard this. But Dr. Heflin used to talk about that, faith explores the who and science explores the how. And when they stay in their own lane, they complement one another beautifully. And I thought that was a really kind of, beautiful way to explain that. It's oversimplification, but really still a beautiful way to explain that. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah. I mean, it is simple, but it's a great starting point because when we look to science for the who or for purpose or meaning or our ultimate destiny, it just isn't equipped to answer those questions, but it's really good at the how questions.
Right.
So thinking about what it's for and what kind of questions we're asking each thing. And if you go to the Bible and ask, well, so at what temperature does water boil? The Bible doesn't have an answer to that, okay? So that isn't the questions that the Bible's addressing. So you need to look in the right place.
Okay, great. Well, the last time we were together was in San Diego at the previous Faith and Science Conference. This was actually the first time I had ever been to one of your meetings. I had just previously heard of BioLogos. I was really intrigued by the mission and the purpose of the organization. So I thought, hey, they're meeting in San Diego, California, so that's not a bad place to meet. So I went out and checked it out. But it was also as the country and actually the world was beginning to come out of the global pandemic. And I remember your founder, Francis Collins, giving a speech there and you touching upon this as well about the significance of the pandemic, not only the virus itself, but how the scientific community came together to address this one particular issue, which is, I think, really significant. I'd love for you to make some comments about that. But then also, there were so many lessons within the totality of that time, because you had a big pushback on how to respond to the virus with masking and social distancing. And then, of course, the virus comes out. And I'll never forget the moment when Dr. Collins talked about that moment he received the news that the vaccine was working. And he said he stood in his study and wept. And then he wept again when he began to learn that people were rejecting the virus because of
the vaccine,
because of some, belief system. So what lessons, and here we are exactly 4 years from when this began to break out. What lessons do you think we have learned both as a scientific community as well as a faith community?
I was watching, during the pandemic and seeing like every one of my scientific colleagues was trying to find some way to support the work to find a vaccine, to find treatments, to do testing. Even in physics, you can take the virus and do X-ray and laser analysis of it and things like that. And that the vaccine then turned out to be so incredibly effective, way more than expected.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at my church, I had been asked to lead the congregational prayer the Sunday after that. And so I was able to include in there to thank God that we had a vaccine. So the vaccine saved so many lives. But then all of this misinformation happened and all this polarization. And polarization does take two sides. It doesn't mean the fault was all on one side. But the fact is we became so divided and people became listening to information that was just factually incorrect about the vaccine and ended up not taking it. And now the analysis has been done of how many lives we think were lost because people just chose not to get vaccinated. And it's around 200,000.
Wow.
And so that's people dying because of our polarized society. So that's really heartbreaking. For the scientific community, it's been a big lesson in the importance of communication. What can we do to help the public understand how the scientific process works, what they can count on as far as the testing of vaccines and their safety, but also where scientists don't understand. Early in the pandemic, it was, you don't need masks. Oh, now you got to wear masks. And it felt to the public like it was flip-flopping. But for scientists, it was like, well, more data came in. We have a better understanding now. We're going to give you the most up-to-date data information we had. But it all got so simplified and collapsed down. And then in the polarization of it, I would hear politicians saying, well, I trust the science. And I'm thinking, well, okay, that is not, science is not a one-word rationale for public policy, because when you start getting into quarantines and masks and education and business, there's all sorts of impacts, and it should be a broader conversation. So all of those things, yeah, I've seen the science communicators are really thinking through how do we communicate this information in the future. At BioLogos, we're working to help people understand, when do you see science as reliable? When do you ask questions? When you have top biologists coming and saying, oh, the science of evolution has showed that there's no purpose to humankind and no meaning to our existence. Well, what's a Christian to do? They know that's wrong, but here's a scientist saying it. So therefore the scientist is suspect and wrong. And then can I trust anything that scientists say? And so at BioLogos, we help people tease that out. Like, right. What is trustworthy? Where is the evolutionary biology evidence strong? And where are atheists adding on all of these extra layers to it, which are not required by the data at all? And instead, we can see God working through these processes and being our creator, regardless of how he went about creating us.
Yeah. And I love that explanation, Deb, because, one of the phrases that I have been using recently, and I say recently, probably over the last half a dozen years or so, has been, I'm a practicing theologian, or just kind of like a practicing physician. And I would even say that you're a practicing scientist, because we're always following new data. We're always following new insights and new understandings. And even in theology, we look at it, and hopefully we are closer to understanding God more now than we were, 1,000 years ago, and hopefully 1,000 years ago, or 1,000 years from now, other people will understand God in a different light. And I think some of the times we forget that these things are not just static. There are some natural laws at play in the world, but when we come to trying to discover truth, depending on how you define that and where it is a process. And so what you just said really resonates with me. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. No, I love that. I mean, this is the joy of learning. There's always more to learn. There's more to learn about the natural world. There's more to learn about our fellow human beings as we love them and listen to them. And there's always more to learn about God. And it's great to be a part of that process and to walk into life with that curiosity.
Yeah. You could almost say there's more to tell, but we'll ask that question at the end.
Oh, right. That's your tagline.
Spoiler alert there, Mitch.
What?
So, yes, circling back to you talking about information changing, in the early days of COVID, I just felt like for me, we were all literally in the lab. We didn't realize it before then, but we were in real time in the lab. Were. And so it did feel, I don't know. I mean, it was a scary time, obviously. But then as people would say, well, last week they said this and now this week they said that. But just what you said is, yes, but now there's new information. There's new data. And so just like Mitch said, as we are working out things within science, within theology, within medicine, within law, it's not static that we do hope that we have more information and more knowledge as we go along. Because if we don't, then that maybe is a sign of problems. Anyways, I digress. Let's talk now about the conference coming up in April.
Oh, yes.
So tell us a little bit about it, all the exciting and fun things, and what can participants look forward to?
Oh, it's going to be great. So we are based in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Research Triangle. There's some major universities, research centers, but also a lot of great churches, Christian schools. We're really looking forward to being there. And this is the chance to experience BioLogos in person for 2 days and hear to some really amazing speakers. So this conference is for everybody. You don't have to have special science knowledge or theology knowledge. Philip Yancey is one of our lead speakers.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
And he's going to be talking about beauty and suffering as pathways for his understanding of God. And Philip Yancey, I've been reading his books for so many years, and his understanding of pain and suffering has really helped me understand those difficult issues. And you might have heard he announced a little over a year ago that he was diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Yes.
So he is now facing that suffering in his own body. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say. Francis Collins will be there too. You mentioned his name earlier.
Yes.
He is one of the top biologists in the world. He led the Human Genome Project that gave us, all the genetic stuff we do today, the way you can send your sample in and find out your ancestry and all that. That's all because of the Human Genome Project. And he did that project and went on to lead biology research at the National Institutes of Health. And he's such a wonderful Christian. And he will be talking about his forthcoming book. It's going to be out in the fall. It's called The Road to Wisdom.
Oh, great.
On truth, on truth, science, faith, and trust. Just about the very issues we were just talking about. How do we avoid getting led into conspiracy theories? How do we rebuild trust in the right places and rebuild community and care for each other and not be fighting each other all the time? And he's going to share a bunch of stories from his experiences as a scientist. We also have Felicia Wu Song. She's going to talk about technology and its impact on our spiritual lives. What are our phones doing to us as we're using them all the time?
Guilty.
Charmaine Royale. Yeah, I know. It's kind of scary, isn't it? Charmaine Royale is a professor at Duke University in genetics. She's a real leader in that area. She's going to talk about public health. Rick Lindroth is an ecologist. He's going to talk about ecology and the environment and how it's changing. Camille Dungy is a poet who's going to talk about the natural world and how we encounter that as humans and Christians. So I really like that we're bringing in some of the arts as well as science. It's not just about science. It's about encountering God's creation in every way that we are as humans.
No, I can't wait. I really enjoyed my time with everybody a couple of years ago, and I've been anticipating this conference ever since it was announced. And so Good Faith Media is going to be there with our camera equipment and conducting some interviews. So we're really excited to be there that week in Raleigh, North Carolina. Well, Deb, before we let you go, there was some news that broke yesterday from the World Meteorological Organization. They have reported that they're sounding the red alert about global warming. They are sounding the red alert about global warming, citing record-smashing increases last year in greenhouse gases, land and water temperatures, and melting of glaciers and sea ice. They're really worried that what we're doing is not having an effect to reverse the global temperatures. In fact, they're increasing at a dramatic rate. So could you just comment about that? I feel like, with this new warning issued, that we are past the point of no return, and that terrifies me. So as a scientist, as a person of faith, what can you tell us about climate change? Because we contend at Good Faith Media that climate change affects every issue we address, from economical issues to racial justice issues to just life itself. Global warming is affecting everybody on the planet. So can you speak to this danger that we're facing? And as people of faith, what can we do to counter it?
It is so serious. With every news report that comes out, every one of the IPCC reports, we find we are not doing enough to slow this progression to higher temperatures. And the thing is, we're starting to feel it. Like last summer, record heat. We, for the first time that I remember, had to close schools and when they were just starting out in August and September because it was too hot, and the schools don't have air conditioning here. Wow. We've had a very mild winter here, hardly any ice cover on the Great Lakes, and usually they're about half ice covered. So we can see it happening right around us, and we can see it impacting our families. The kids in our area didn't have very many snow days and couldn't be building the snowmen all the time like they usually can. And those are trivial things, but there's also people just dying of heat waves, the heat stroke in the summers. The death rate from heat is really significant and going up. So I'm so glad to hear that you are not only understand all of this, but you see how it is impacting everything that we do. And so that just raises the importance of us needing to address it. I think as Christians, one thing we can bring is a strong narrative of hope and why we care. Throughout Scripture, we see nature as God's creation, and our calling as image bearers to represent God on this earth and to care for it. So we have that. We see God's command to care for the least of these, and it's going to be the poor and countries around the world that are going to suffer the most from climate change and are suffering already. So we have an incredible motivation as Christians. What can we do? We can still do things. If we all work together now, change is still possible. I recommend the work of Katharine Hayhoe.
Oh, she's great.
She was incredible. She spoke at that conference we were at in San Diego. So you can subscribe to her newsletter, and every week she gives one word of hope, as well as one sign that things are getting worse, and one practical thing you can do. It's a great way to stay.
Great suggestion. Yeah.
All those areas. And one of the big things you can do is talk about it with people around you. So some communities are very aware of this. Other communities still don't see this as an important thing for the church to be doing alongside evangelism and discipleship and all the issues that we care about. But as you say, climate change affects everything, and it is important for the church to address. So those are areas where people can help.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Well, Deborah Haarsma, thank you so much for joining us on Good Faith Weekly. Again, the conference is BioLogos Faith and Science 2024 conference scheduled for April 17th and 19th in Raleigh, North Carolina. You can find out more about the conference at conference.biologos.org, and make sure to use the discount code GOODFAITH to receive 10% off. Well, Deb, thanks so much for joining us. But before we let you go, we've got one last question that we want to ask you.
So, Deb, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of the work that you do in our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
Well, I mentioned a little bit that I'm an astronomer, but can I tell you how vast the universe
Yes,
is?
please do. Because I feel so small sometimes. So make me feel smaller.
Well, that's what the mantra has often been. Oh, the universe is so the universe is so big that our star, the sun, is just one of 100 billion stars in our galaxy, the Milky Way. Well, in my research, I studied other galaxies. The Milky Way, that was just the local neighborhood. We looked out at galaxies hundreds of millions of light years away, a few billion light years away. I studied galaxies that were 1,000 times the size of the Milky Way, incredibly huge. And they're just a tiny fraction of the entire universe. So, yeah, it can make you feel really small. And physically, yes, we are small compared to all of that. But let me tell you that scripture says we shouldn't feel small. Mm. So in Psalm 103, it says, "For as high as the heavens are above the earth," and it doesn't say, "Oh, then how small you are." It says, "For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is God's love." So God says, yeah, it's a vast universe out there, and that's how big my love is. So the next time you look out at the universe and you think it's a great big place, just remember that's how big our God is.
I think
chills.
I think Deb just started preaching.
I think she did. I think we're going to have her back.
I preach that sermon every chance I get. I want people to know.
That is fantastic.
We're going to have her back because we're going to have to talk more about the galaxies.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exciting. So, yeah. So this has led me to another question I didn't even think about. So, solar eclipse, are you excited?
Oh, yes. Yes, that is coming up on April 8th. And there's a lot of places you can go online to learn all about it. And it's traveling, the eclipse path is right through a lot of very populated areas. You do need to plan ahead because so many people are going to see it. The traffic is going to be crazy. It might be hard to get into stores and restaurants and things. So just plan ahead a bit. But it is an amazing experience to see a total solar eclipse. 99% is not good enough. Get into the 100% totality zone. It is entirely different.
Okay.
Entirely. The last one I was at, we had lodging outside of the eclipse zone. And some people were just staying there. And we got back at the end of the day and like, oh yeah, we saw the 90%. I'm like, no, you missed it. It's entirely different when the sun is completely blotted out and what it looks like. It's glorious.
That is great intel because we are in that 90 to 95. So we were planning to drive just far enough.
Yeah. Yep, drive far enough to get into totality.
So I have to ask, where does an astrophysicist watch a total eclipse?
Well, the last one it was 2017, right? We planned our family vacation around it a year in advance.
I love that so much.
We went out to Oregon, and it was the site most likely to have clear skies, and we had beautiful clear skies, and it was incredible. This year, we didn't. Since we had such a good experience the last time, we didn't plan as much, but we are just going to drive from here into, I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're going to drive a few hours down into Ohio or Indiana, depending on where the weather looks to be clear that day. And hopefully we'll see it.
Nice.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. And thank you so much for joining us on Good Faith Weekly. We're really excited about the upcoming conference, and it's just been a joy to talk to you.
Oh, it's good to talk to you, Mitch and Missy, and I hope to see you. I will look forward to seeing you at the conference.
Great. Missy, this conversation really took me back a long time ago when I was in seminary and I first heard Dr. Boo Heflin, my Old Testament professor.
I feel like we need to start just prefacing every episode. You've given him so many props in every episode. He's just wonderful.
He's just a wonderful, wonderful man. But I can remember him teaching about faith and science. And, as a young pastor trying to figure out my own theology back then, those two collided for me. And I thought science was out to disprove the existence of God. Mm-hmm. And then I had a man of God, a theologian, just a wonderful human being all around, tell me that faith and science do not contradict one another. In fact, they work perfectly in conjunction with one another as long as they answer the questions that they are trying to answer.
Right. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt because it just reminded me of having some friends who sent their children to private school.
Right.
And said they were so proud because that private school, the only book they use for history is the Bible.
Right.
And we talked about that too.
Yeah.
Much like science, it's meant for a different purpose.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it gets a little problematic when you try to use one for the other.
Yeah. And so, Dr. Heflin used to talk about science in a very affirming way, saying science is trying to figure out the how of the universe. How does all of this work together? And it's an unending search for questions, or an unending search for answers to an unending pool of questions. And the same can be true for theology. Theology concentrates on the who. And for theologians, especially Christian theologians, it's about the Creator and how the Creator relates to the Creator's creation. And we're part of that creation. And so that is the questions that are important to theology, and the others are the questions that are important to science. And as long as they stay in their lanes, all is well. It's when we cross those lanes that we
and
get
do you remember,
problematic.
did you have students in your history class, or not history, but science classes, that when you did the evolution unit, they were excused and would go write some other research paper because their parent would, flip out that you weren't teaching creation or...
Yeah.
Anyways, in fact, a meme came across my social media feed today that's so perfect for this conversation and kind of where we've come. But it's 90 scientists. Hey, we cloned a sheep. We landed a robot on Mars. Scientists today are saying for the last time the Earth is round. And it feels like that sometimes. Like
Right,
we've
it
gone
does.
full circle. And the Bible or the book you're using for faith and practice, like you said, answers the who, but it's also generally people use their faith or their religion, whatever that is, whether that's Christianity or not, as a guideline for their ethic, for
Right.
the way they live out their life, not to tell me how to cure cancer.
Right.
And I think what Deborah said that just resonated, and I've thought about it a lot, is when she says, that sign, the billboard that she saw that says, put our faith in science. She's like, scientists don't want you to put your faith in them. We just showed the evidence. Like this,
Right.
It's very much like this is what we observed. This is the result. It's just they are following the evidence and the results that they see as they're performing experiments or doing research in science.
Exactly. And that's why, I loved about my first time at BioLogos 4 years ago, during the height of the pandemic, which it's hard to believe it's been 4 years, almost to the T right now. But, when there was such a pushback on masking and social distancing, and then eventually the vaccine itself, especially from the faith community, I started doing a lot of research on faith and science, and I came across BioLogos and its founder, Francis Collins. Francis Collins, like Deborah, is just brilliant. I mean, just absolutely brilliant. And he led the national effort, the United States, in reacting to the coronavirus, as well as helping in trying to find the vaccine. More people would probably know him as Dr. Anthony Fauci's boss. But Francis Collins is a brilliant man, but he's also a man of faith. He's a person of faith. And so when I found out about BioLogos, I went out to San Diego to their conference out there and just learned so much from these brilliant people. I mean, Deborah is an astrophysicist. I don't think we've had an astrophysicist on the show before.
We never have, and I still think we need to have her back because I have more questions.
So, I mean, these are bright, bright people, yet they understand the world, that there is something beyond doing assessment and reporting their findings, that there is this metaphysical presence behind the physical. And that too is important in the totality of life. And so they have no qualms about living out their faith as well as being scientists. And so it was a brilliant experience out in San Diego, but I'll never forget what Francis Collins said when he talked about the pandemic. And when he got the phone call that night from Europe that the vaccine was working, and he stood in his study and just wept. And he thought, never has the world seen a concerted effort by scientists to tackle one of the hardest questions that humanity has ever faced. And they came together and they found a solution in a supersonic speed. And it was just really amazing. And then the second time he cried was when he began to hear the news of Christians rejecting the vaccine as a sign of the beast, or of just saying that they were being infiltrated by microorganisms and just all the nonsense.
Right. And you took a phone call or two from
I did.
Scientists who were asking you, what does this mean?
I got a phone call from an epidemiologist one time that said, hey, we're getting this news from some certain parts of our state and we don't know what to do with it. I said, okay, tell me what's going on. They said, they're talking about the vaccine being the mark of the beast. What is that? I went, oh, you have no idea. Yeah. Sit down. This is going to take a while.
Right.
So at any rate, again, just to recap, faith and science, for me, they have a place in my life.
As does history.
As does history, absolutely. And I believe in science. I trust the science. I also understand that the science is always evolving because they're constantly, the atmosphere, the environment is changing. And so when you test something in different environments, you get different results. And so you just have to understand that. At the same time, my faith has evolved over the years, as the Christian faith has evolved over the years. So to say anything is static, I think, is absolutely, asinine. And so I think it's important to know that. I think it's important to live that out and to make certain that both of those disciplines are part of one's life and ideology. So I'm a big believer in science, Missy.
I'm a big believer in evolution, as you've talked about. Your faith evolving.
Yes.
As science evolves, as we evolve as human beings, everything is an evolution. Mm-hmm. And to say that one discounts the other is really detrimental to our society, because we need to be progressing. We need to be learning more. God gave us the ability. If we believe that our God, our creator, is as big as God is, then we need to also accept that we can continue to learn. There's always more to learn, more to glean. The Creator has provided what we need on this earth to survive and exist and thrive. We need to learn how to do that in the very best way.
Absolutely. I mean, just like, your attitude towards your pastor husband has evolved over 28 years, going from the stained glass window, as you talked about the first part of the episode, to today. It's evolved. I mean, things have changed, right?
I've just learned to live with broken windows.
Life is so much better with broken windows.
That's right.
Oh, my gosh. Well, we want to remind the audience that BioLogos is happening next month in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they can sign up for the conference at biologos.org. They can find out more information, and I'm going to be there, so I'd love to see you.
Well, and also there's a discount code.
No way.
Yes. So go to conference.biologos.org and use the discount code GOODFAITH for a discount on registration, and folks should definitely sign up and join you.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a fun week, Missy.
Yes.
And next week, we'll be back. Until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.